Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Incubator Podcast. This is your co-host, Abir Saran.
And I'm Darren Boyd. Today, we're joined by Nick Durkin, who's the Field CTO and VP of Field Engineering for Harness. Harness is it's one of our favorites in the SSDLC space. So they build a software delivery platform with a whole set of capabilities in that we're going to get into that makes DevOps easier. Founded in 2016, they've raised over $425 million through a Series D. We're excited to have Nick join us today. Nick, before we get into any of the content, the capabilities, et cetera, would you mind taking us through a little bit of your background, just do some introductions, and then we'll dive into the conversation?
Sure, yeah. Like you said, Nick Durkin, I'm a field CTO. I was employee number 9 here at Harness, so we started real early. But before that, I worked in the financial services sector, created a lot of patents around fraud prevention, mobile authentication, data aggregation. If you've paid someone with Zelle in your life, was part of that, and got into the startup world. And I've been building early stage startups, helping them find market fit, and then growing their teams. So I run a team of about 66 people now at Harness, which is much different than the original 9.
Wow. Well, being employee number 9, Nick, you've witnessed the growth that Harness has had. Could you walk us through where things started? I know Harness played in the CD space of things, and since then you've added plenty of feature sets or product enhancements. If you wouldn't mind walking us through that journey and how that growth went at Harness.
Sure. Yeah. When we looked at the problem, we looked at CI and we looked at CD. We looked at it as 2 separate things. We looked at CI being code to artifact. And we looked at CD as artifact, not just to production, but to customer, right? Like it's got to get to production. It's got to be good. And a lot of people in the monitoring space kind of can attest to that. And so we started life in CD. We said that's the place that people need to work the most. No one's building their own compilers anymore. No one was building their own CI tools, but people hadn't really defined a CD tool. And we had phenomenal success, picked up over 500 customers doing continuous delivery in a governed, audited, secure fashion that allowed people to go fast without breaking the rules. And that's where we kind of got our start. And what happened after that is you pick up 500 customers and they all have wants and needs. And we're not an if you build it, they will come company. So we don't just randomly build things. But our customers ask us, hey, we thought CI was solved too, but can you add the same auditability, the governance, the compliance? Can you use AI and machine learning like you did in continuous delivery to take away the worst part of our job? Can you do it throughout the entire software delivery lifecycle? And that's where either through acquisition or through building from scratch, we went and started building what our customers asked for. So we went and grabbed Drone, the most loved open source CI tool on the planet. Don't trust me. You can go to GitHub and see how many stars it has, right? Like I can't make that stat up. And we started there to say, let's go build CI and CD together where they can interoperate together. But you still give the power to and you still empower people to actually work in the system together. Beyond that, right, security was one of those areas where folks weren't really being brought into the DevOps section, right? And thus DevSecOps. And we wanted to really empower those teams, right? And add security testing and orchestration through that. We wanted to make sure that you didn't have bad guys when we're talking about deployments, right? We shouldn't have friction between operations and dev. So build things around SLIs, SLOs, air budgets, and really being able to bind those. And really start giving a full featured set for the entire software delivery lifecycle. And that's really our point. Our point is to remove the worst part of your best engineers' jobs throughout the entire software delivery lifecycle. And so every module that we build, we do that. One that's interesting, and a lot of people would say, like cloud cost, is that's not part of the software delivery lifecycle. And I completely disagree. If we're not empowering people with the right information at the right time, we're doing them a disservice. And you can ask the engineers, hey, great, how much is that going to cost you? No idea.
Yeah.
They're not going to make the right decision. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, what I love about everything I've seen in your product, it does seem to organically fit together beautifully. It actually tells a really, really interesting story. And the capabilities you've been adding along the way and the acquisitions like Chaos Native, I think really aligns to where the customer is. You can tell you've got this maturity scale that you've been working with customers. And I think that's an important aspect that you just highlighted. You've been doing this with customer feedback. It clearly reflects in the product. So to be fair, I don't know how best to dive into some of what you do, right? I like STO. I like CCM. I like CE. I like all of the pieces. I like the feature flag stuff. I'm like terribly interested in that space. But I thought maybe we could start with something very, very simple, which is What is the architecture, the general architecture? Maybe you can walk us through the delegates and where do I install things and how can I consume things? Maybe we start there and then we can start to build up from there.
Sure. I think architecturally we designed this to meet every single security and regulatory commission on the planet. If we're going to offer you a SaaS solution, we have to offer it in a way that you can actually use it securely. And so to your point, we bring up what we call the delegates. So, a lot of people are afraid of agents sitting everywhere along the system, and we didn't want that. We didn't want things installed everywhere. But we wanted and we need the ability to execute tasks with proximity to the systems you want us to execute them with. Right? Back in the day, people were using jump servers or different, ways to get to different systems. In the same sense, if you want me to orchestrate tooling, if you want me to read from LDAP, if you want me to pick up from your artifact repositories or push to them, if you want me to deploy to servers, SSH into them, or talk to Kubernetes, I need to be able to do it with proximity and traditionally from behind your firewall. That also allows us, by doing so, the ability to interact with those secure systems and keep your secrets where your secrets live. So the idea and the intention of this is that you can have as many delegates as you need. I like things in highly available. All right, so you can have them in HA, and you can have them in all different regions with proximity. So you can have locality for that purpose, and for DR and locality. And ultimately, the number of delegates required to interact with your system, I think your network teams and your security teams will define them more than the actual application teams themselves.
All right, fair. So why don't we? Mm-hmm. So I do want to come back to the products, but why don't we start with some philosophical discussions? Because we have customers that have pain.
Yeah. So Nick, I mean, philosophically speaking, right? We have customers that are struggling with questions like, do I have a single pipeline, an enterprise-wide pipeline? Do I have distributed pipelines? And you hear this concept of maybe distributed CI, centralized deployment. But how should an enterprise think about the pipeline? Should they have many to begin with? What has maybe even from your experience lent to this proliferation of, hey, I'm just going to bring my own pipeline or build my own pipeline? And so would they then, depending on one deployment pattern or the other of a pipeline, is it better to go consolidated together, distributed? And how should then harness be looked at in terms of supporting an institution, no matter which path or pattern that they undertake?
Sure. So I think I'm going to start with my philosophical pieces just to add on to it, right? I think everything should be dry. Don't repeat yourself. And the fact that we are talking about Drift and Jenkins still just bewilders me. We go to customers, they have 5,000 applications, and they have 5,500 pipelines to get them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's insane. It doesn't make sense, and you wouldn't do it anywhere else in your business. If you look at applications like you would airplanes, right? I've got little Cessnas, and I got massive A380s. Right? An A380 takes an army of people to get in the air, an army of people to fly, to service, right? And look at those as your monoliths, right? Mm-hmm. And you got microservices, and you got little Cessnas flying around, and unfortunate if one crashes, but you can still get a whole bunch where you need to. The interesting thing is they don't launch on different runways. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't build separate runways for every plane. But at companies today, that's how they do it. And it doesn't make sense. And so a lot of our customers have made that change. Right? They've gone from 5,500 pipelines to deliver 5,000 applications to 26 templates. Now, one template is not going to be realistic for your entire company. But you might have one for Tomcat, and you might have one for Kubernetes, and you might have one for stateful, container deployments, one for stateless. But again, you're not going to have 5,500 of them. You're going to have 20-something. And this becomes something that people can wrap their head around and they can use. This also gives you a way to extend them. If you can put access control on them, if you can put policy around those, now you can actually take that same pipeline and you can have it extended, right? But you're still using that same base. That template that you have is still where people start, and you don't have drift.
Yeah, there's a couple. One, I like the runway model because I've heard, I read an article, I forget where it was, but it said, hey, if you build a road in the U.S., it costs about $3 million per mile. And would you have a specialized road for every type of vehicle on the street? The answer is no. It makes no sense. So there is the idea of having as few as possible. I like the dry principle. But then there's also, we're seeing a lot of our customers have different cohorts of capability in their developers. So in some cases, they want to build things as pipeline as code. In other cases, they want to externalize some of the logic into reusable artifacts. In other cases, hey, we're just going to break up CI/CD. In other cases, long-lived pipelines. So there's the idea of proliferating pipelines, and then there's the idea of instantiating those pipelines in some manner. I guess a similar question. How do you get the right construct for the right capability? And what have you seen out there in that space? Because that's another doozy that we're running into as consultants.
We actually ran into this exact problem with our first generation of the product. So originally, we only had the ability to create templates. So you could use the template that was given to you. And I think that works great for maybe 80% of the company. Mm-hmm. But there's a nice 20% that genuinely need the ability to go and create and do something unique because that's their task and that's what they're required to do. And we didn't have something for them originally. And this is where we came up with the concept of now being able to govern these pipelines. Have policy as code on top of your pipelines for the first time. So now it's fine. If you don't want to use the template, if you don't want to extend from the template, I can create policies. I can have my security team. I can empower a security team who literally can give you the regulations. So I need code scans. I need to make sure those code scans come out with the appropriate number of CVEs. I need to have approvals. I need to have certain testing done in certain environments. And if you follow those, you can go to production all you want. But if you don't, the system never allows you to because of those policies that are in place. And so our intention is to give you both options. Right? Really, we should try to force as much as we can down the templates that we know are work and sophisticated for a business. But if you need that unique ability, now give them a policy that they can work in and operate in that gives them the guardrails to make sure they can't go off. Right? Make it easy for people to do the right things. Make it hard for them to do the wrong things.
I like the opinionated view on that. I think that really works. I think we've seen it in other capabilities that you've launched. Like I was looking deeper into the CI space, and I love what you've done from an intelligent testing perspective, where you've just keep layering in ways to make this more efficient, make it make sense. What I'm referring to is your ability to maybe prune out some tests that aren't as applicable because you have an intelligent server. It's communicating with your agents. It knows what's been deployed before. It knows what you've scanned before. It knows what you've tested before, and it can make changes accordingly. So I really appreciate that. And I think it really helps. And this is why we're seeing Harness win in the marketplace as well. So we love some of that. So aside from some of those patterns, folks doing parallelization and so on and so forth, what about, and I'll stay on this idea of philosophy, what other things, Nick, are needed to truly embrace the maturity that you're imparting with your pipeline? So from a cultural aspect, from a test organization aspect, from a reporting and analytics aspect, what other things does a organization really need to start developing in order to really get the most out of what Harness can bring as a capability?
So when we first started, you actually needed quite a bit. You needed to have all of your security folks on the phone. You needed to have your network folks there. You needed to have massive architectural meetings, and it took a ton of power. And this was actually one of the issues, is onboarding took a ton of time. And what we've decided is that we want to give folks the ability to crawl, walk, and then run. And so really give them an opportunity to go and start leveraging the pieces of the platform they need, but not hamper them until those are those requirements. And so what we tend to do is make it so that every group in your entire organization has the ability to interact with that same tooling the way they're used to it. You brought it up earlier. I might want to do this all as config as code. That's great, but there needs to be some guardrails around it. So now we're going to have policy to make sure if I'm going to even commit that, is it committable? Does it have the checks that I need? Does it have the scans, right? If I'm security, I want to be able to write policy to make sure that no one can misbehave, right? So now, great, you can't even get to production if you don't follow these rules. If I'm the operations side of life, if I'm sitting as the SRE or the infrastructure teams, I want to be able to define where is allowed to go, right? Am I allowed to go to certain clouds? Am I allowed to use certain tooling? What are those there for? If I want to create pipelines, I should be able to share them out with the people that I need. And honestly, as a developer, I should never see Harness unless something goes wrong. And even take Harness out of it. You should never see your tooling, period, unless it goes wrong. And the only thing I want out of that tooling, if something does go wrong, is I want to get to all the answers. And that's the intent, is bring all of the why and make that available so we can solve the problem now, not have to dig at 27 different products to do so.
Yeah.
I think that's really, it's about empowering those teams.
Yeah. So that warrants or begs a question as a follow-up. Again, more philosophy here. So Nick, in engaging with these teams and working through all of those, let's call it semantics and processes and things of that nature. So theoretically, once things are humming, they don't know what the underlying technology is unless something goes wrong. So how do you begin to actually start to rationalize the team? So whether they had 5,000 pipelines originally and getting down to a healthy 20% or of that down to maybe like 20 or 25, whatever it was, depending on the size. How do organizations typically work through? And because Harness has the ability to put the governance and the policies in place, how do you see that process working out? And how long is it taking for these enterprises to really get down to that point?
So I can tell you that you can offer it as a carrot or a stick. Stick doesn't tend to work. If you ask every executive who's bought Harness, if you ask him specifically, and I asked this question, was Harness a carrot or a stick? And everyone said a carrot. The best answer was from Choice Hotels, and they specifically said, for 80% of our business, it was a carrot, and for 20% of our business, it was a large carrot-shaped stick. And I thought that was probably an accurate answer, right? I thought it was probably the most accurate answer. And I think the reality is this, is no one likes babysitting deployments. No one loves waiting for all those tests to run. No one loves configuring when, we should turn on and off the servers to save money. Like all of these tasks that we hate, right? If you start automating those pieces, it becomes a carrot because I don't have to do it. You listen to the folks, when we started polling all of our users, it was great. I get my nights and weekends back. It wasn't even something we built into our plan. Like that wasn't why we built Harness originally, but the reality was that's what we were giving people. And it's because they didn't have to babysit deployments. They didn't have to sit there and wait for things to run. They knew if it failed, it'd get you back to where you were before you started. So, long story short is you start with the most impactful areas and it becomes a carrot for the company, because who wants to sit there and still be on call on the weekends, right? Waiting for the results, sitting in the war room. Like no one wants to do that. And if you can have that carrot, it honestly proliferates itself.
So on that note, do you find that most of the initial teams, the first adopters, if you will, were they the monoliths, the 380s, or were they the Cessna planes and the microservices based architecture teams and applications that were more accepting of the carrot?
Yeah, I think honest, easy answer is that it's the microservices. They have less to do to move over there. One of the things that we do is when we test this with customers, especially look at our financial services customers, you look at healthcare, we test with all of it. So when we do the proof of values, we're testing both the A380s and the Cessna. So we're doing the microservices, we're doing the large monoliths. The pain traditionally is, you ask somebody, great, you've built this, it's working for Tomcat, for your mainframe, for whatever legacy technology you're using, you've built that. Do you want to build it again for X, for a cloud initiative, for a Kubernetes initiative, for a container initiative? That's when it gets interesting. And that's where, again, those are the teams that come over first. But then they see the pain that they were going to have with microservices, because there's a little bit of pain that comes with that, right? Go away. When that pain goes away, now it gets interesting. And now you get the true benefits of the actual microservices if they're truly governed in the way that they operate. And that brings on the rest of the teams. And honestly, where teams go is where's the most pain? What are they spending the most time on? What could get their engineers back the time that they want to be spending on things? Jyothi, our CEO, put out a poll on how much time you spend engineering, writing code every day. And literally, it was less than 3 hours.
Oh.
That's insane. We've got engineers that are phenomenal. This is what they want to do, and yet we've burdened them with these tasks of, infrastructure and pipelining and all these other things that, again, not what they love doing. Let's get them back to exactly what they love.
There's a couple things you said in there. It feels like people want to, when we talk to our customers about Harness, they want to use it. And it's things like you've got patents in the CI space, like we talked about, intelligent testing. That can reduce my test time, waiting time by 90 some odd %. You've got patents in the CCM space for cost management. Like you said, You can turn off assets. That's one of the actions you can do. You've got patents in statistical regression and performance management space for the CD. I think you have, you probably have patents in the CE space, right? And that's another, like, you're making it easier for me to do my job. To your point, I want to code, but you're making it really cool and easy to do other things like the chaos engineering stuff. So the one place that I struggle with personally is thinking about, from a security perspective, there is a period where people are going to be migrating over to Harness, and they're going to be using some of their other tool sets and other pipelines. As a security practitioner, I need to make sure that it's safe for everybody to use my policies, no matter what you're using and no matter where you are in that migration. Is it fair to say that all of my policies in Harness can be externalized? They can be in a repo. I can have SCM on those policies, and you can pull from those, so that I can use those same policies potentially. I don't even know the reality of this for some of the other pipelines that we're migrating from. Is that something that you see, and is that a reality that we can expect as people are migrating to this?
Well, this is actually one of the reasons we wrote it around OPA, so the Open Policy Agent. So this has been picked up, largely, sure in the Kubernetes community, but globally with all the cloud providers as well. So we did it again in a way that security folks are used to. So we built ours around OPA.
Perfect.
OPA. And that gives you the portability. And of course, I want you to be able to store it in a repo. Sure, I want it visualized in the UI, and I want it accessible to the people that are either writing it, but also the ones that are consuming it. Right? We want to provide it in that capacity where, again, it makes sense for each team. Empower each one of those teams. And so, yeah, it's written and designed with that exact function. That again, it can be more than just Harness. But we wanted to give you, for the first time, not the ability to, put policy around your infrastructure, but put it around the way, right? The way things get deployed, the how, as we like to define it, right? We call it the pipeline. But today, most people have been doing it on what's running. Hey, you can't run a container here. You can't put that in that environment. We wanted to define and allow the rules on how things get deployed. Because for most of our customers, the what is important. The how is what's audited. How it got to production is actually important. And that's where we want to put the rules around it. But yeah, to your point, this is why, and you'll find out through all of our products, right? A, we want to remove the worst part of your jobs, but B, we want to center it in a way that's usable and consumable. We want to work in the open source, to your point, right? We've got products or projects in the CNCF. We've got drone in the open source. We want to make this consumable by the people who want to use it.
Yeah. Nick, if I can jump to CCM on the cost management side of things. So traditionally, when we talk about that we want to make sure that the developer understands exactly what his costs will be for his particular product, an application, et cetera, et cetera. But this function has been traditionally managed by, let's call it a FinOps organization or a finance or centralized function. How are you seeing Harness CCM offering kind of complementing or working into that traditional FinOps function?
Sure. I was the receiver of this phone call from our CFO multiple times. Hey, you've got a team. They've got $10,000 extra in spend. What is it? Why is it? Like, go look at it. It was a month late. We already spent the money, right? 10, 20, 100 grand, whatever it was. And this is traditionally how we get alerted. Hey, by the way, what's going on? Somebody has to go do the research. So it's a month late on the data, and then it's 2 weeks later on the research. By the time you shut it down, you're 6 weeks later. Why? This is what I was talking about, empowering people, right? When I talk about shift left, like, I think we got it wrong. Like, don't shift left all the work. Shift left the information. If an engineer knows that they could use smaller servers, they could use less memory and less CPU resources, they would do it. Mm-hmm. But we don't provide them the information. Right? The reason we have those engineers working in our company is because we trust them to do what's best for the company, and they will. But we haven't been giving them that information. Right? This is one of the key tenets: is that now, look, go inspect and understand what those usages are. Understand that I've over-provisioned it. Here's, by the way, how you can bring it down. And then, more importantly, no one wants to sit there and figure out a schedule of when you should run and not run your non-production systems. Right? Like, to us, that's a huge one. We look at waste at companies. They've got massive databases sitting up and running. They've got huge, systems that are designed for, QA that run once at the end of a sprint. and yet we keep them up 24/7, or maybe for 8 hours a day even. But why? We can understand, again, removing the worst part of your best engineers' jobs. What constitutes load? Well, am I getting a batch job, right? Or am I taking network traffic? Well, if we monitor for those two things, I can just shut the systems down and bring them back up with all of their dependencies for you. It's really thinking about it logically like your best engineers would. But again, that's not a task that they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, you said something important is, given the right information, they'll make the right decisions. But similar to, we talk about DevOps, right? Developers and operational function. I think the FinOps piece needs to shift left. And I think there's a little bit of a cultural mindset that needs to happen, or from going from centralization to decentralized, working with those development teams and providing that information. And I think there is still maybe a centralized function kind of manage that to a degree. But if we hit the spend on the source side, then logically it should, dwindle down in terms of less leakage and things, wastage, come to the centralized review a month later, 2 months later, and you would see month-on-month progress. So makes a lot of sense.
But I also like that
I think those budgets need to be owned too by that central team. Like, we still have to define those, but now let's be more intelligent about how we understand how they're being used.
Yeah, and I like how you're moving from not just information, but you're actually taking action on some of this as well. And I expect we're going to see more of that action-based control over time, which I'm excited about. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about, at least, is, let's say we have a CISO and she is tasked with not only securing this SDLC process, but she also has to protect the underlying constructs. So how do we, practically speaking, protect the pipeline itself in cases where we've built templates, we've got some policies out there, but can we truly make sure that people are adhering to those? And how do we know they're adhering to those? Can we protect from certain plugins while allowing other plugins? Can we help protect our branches itself? We recognize that the pipeline has a lot of control, right? And so a lot of these folks are trying to limit that blast radius, but that's not the only way we can control. What are you seeing in that space? How is that CISO supposed to be able to have confidence that the pipeline itself we can trust, which can be an exceptionally difficult thing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think we ran into this specifically. This is one of our biggest problems. If you look at the financial services sector, this was the biggest question. If we're going to now allow a tool to do all of this work and all of our different systems, it has to be controlled. And so one of the things is everything has to be as code. To your point, you have to store this in a repo. We have to be able to look at that. It also can't just be role-based access control. We tried that, right? Role-based access control is great, but at some point, we're going to give somebody permissions to do large administrative functions, and they can do just about anything. And of course, that comes down to trust, and then we get to zero trust and all these fun pieces. But what we said is, okay, part of it's RBAC. You have to be able to make sure that the right users can do the right things, make it easy for them to do the right things, make it hard for them to do the wrong things. Second, it's that policy portion. Now we can start guaranteeing that you can't even create a pipeline. You can't save it if it doesn't meet those policies. And so by creating policies that allow you to warn or block on save or on execution, right, whether it be large pipeline execution or even task execution, now you can actually start really having those pieces in place that you can't bypass. Right? So now we've got a rule per se that says I have to have a specific code scanner, because those are the code scanners that we use. If your pipeline doesn't have it, it can't even save. Couldn't even create it, which means no one could execute it. Maybe we allow it in non-production systems. So maybe we allow that to be created, but when they try to execute it, the rule says it cannot execute in a production, in which case you get the large error. Guess what? Can't run. You don't have it. By giving security the ability to have that ability, this is what's allowed actually our large financial customers to get rid of those the large cabs. Right? We don't have to sit here anymore and have 9 people approve a change that they didn't write, that they don't understand how it's going to affect infrastructure, because now they can write policy. And if it doesn't meet that policy, it doesn't even show up on the doorstep. And that's what's giving people confidence when you see that actually being, and again, the ability to have it as warn and then, block, I can start with just understanding and getting the statistics. Great. How many people aren't doing what I asked them to do? And we can start working through that process. I can set drop dead dates. Hey, by the end of October, everyone must have X scan, Y approval, Z test. And now we've got the warns. We understand. They know where it's at. Hard cut, end of October.
I love that, by the way, Nick. I really love that because that conversation has to happen in an organization. We have to partner with the engineering community differently. And everything you just said there, I think, is so important. So we really, really appreciate that. Folks are scared about teams that can self-police. They're fearful of folks that can resequence, reorder, bypass, etc. And it's actually fairly prevalent. When we look at a lot of our customers, we're seeing that there are so many ways to circumvent, and that's one of the places we start with. And then, of course, there's this whole idea of leakage and tampering and some other things. But all of this together is something that we have to have those conversations with. So I love the way you position it. I love the way Harness enables it. So hopefully we can have a little bit of fun now and talk about some products, because there are a few companies that I see diving into new domains that actually do it better than most, if not all, of folks that specialize in those domains. I haven't seen too many people do what you're doing in the chaos engineering space. From the feature flag space, I see you as one of the most complete solutions on the market today. But it's you really apply that to all the domains that you've decided to enter. So maybe you can walk us through maybe the high level what some of these capabilities are, and then if time permits, we'll go into a couple of those areas because I think they're all fascinating.
Yeah, I think to your point, if we're going to create a product, our intention is to be top notch. Like, I don't want to create a product to be half-hearted.
Yeah,
that's not the intent. And we want to go solve real problems. And so each one of our areas of focus is really around removing that worst part of someone's job. So every one of these, we're going to take care of something that people hate doing. And that's the intention. If from CI, I think you've mentioned it, right? We want to go and make a CI that scales, make one that operates with all of the benefits of a containerized technology, but give you your time back. So again, testing. If I change the gas cap on your car, you wouldn't expect me to test every light switch and every stereo knob, but yet we don't do that. And so look, we'll go decompile it for you. We'll rip it apart, understand what you changed, understand what tests you updated or changed, and only run those on your PR.
Yeah.
Right on your master build, you can run everything, but like every time I'm pushing a PR every day, I 50 lines of code, I should not be running 5,000 unit tests. It shouldn't happen. Right? You look at feature flags. Tons of different tooling out there. A lot of people have built them mostly internally, right? The database toggles or different feature flags. We built them with pipelining and governance because we found that that's where people actually struggled. And even in the banks, like, they wanted to prove the person that wrote the code is the one deploying it, right? Now they're realizing, like, they've been writing feature flags and just flipping flags all day long, right? So what if we've got policy? What if we have the ability to pipeline these to actually go and do some neat things? We got a customer. They buy a service through another financial service. It's their trading app, and if it's down, their customers get really mad. So they have monitoring. Go look. If that app's down, on their website or on their app, it goes and flips it. Feature flag flips. Says, hey, you know what? Point them to the web instead of you doing it in the app. We'll keep the customer happy. They can still trade. They can still do their pieces. As soon as performance comes back up on that app, boom, right, lobs it back. But that's allowing it to be part of a pipeline. We're taking inputs externally.
That's me. But by the way, like that one to me is, I don't think people appreciate how complex feature toggles can be. And you've done it beautifully. Like, you have release toggles, you've got experimental toggles, you've got operations, as you just said, flags. And then you have these dependencies. If I have a microservice that's depending now on a feature flag, I need to keep track of that. And I think you're releasing lifecycle management soon, but you've got proxy capability, multivariate capability, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know how you're managing some of that complexity and how you keep track of that complexity. But I like the fact that we're moving into the pipeline. I like the fact that GitOps is attached to it. I think this is something is very, very smart to do in a pipeline, and I think you guys do it very well.
It's something that we watched Knight Capital lose. They owned 18% of the NASDAQ, and then one morning they went bankrupt because of a bad feature flag.
Oh.
If you haven't read that story, it's a great one. We took our largest outage here at Harness. I'll be honest, like because of a feature flag. We did a deployment. At the same time, somebody flipped the flag. We didn't know about it. We rolled back because we're really good at that. It was still broken. And it took us hours to figure it out. If that was part of a pipeline, if it was audited, we'd know exactly who did it, when it happened, how it happened. For that matter, if it wasn't allowed to, it wouldn't have happened. And those are the types of things that genuinely, if you want to do this at scale, if you want to operate, are required. Right? To your point, chaos. Like this is something that has been sitting around, and the Netflix of the world, of course, this was their mantra. And as people progress in their software delivery lifecycle, this becomes one of those testing that we have to be prepared for it. And so being able to provide that in a capacity that is consumable, again, for all the different teams and making it easy, right? Intelligently grabbing from the metrics that you have, really thinking about it like your best engineers. Now it's not an effort where we spend an entire weekend pulling network cords anymore. It's we let an automated system handle it, get it back to where it was, and give us the report so we can go fix it.
Can you walk us through that one a little bit, Nick? I haven't had a chance to dive into it. I saw that you have a whole series out of the box, which I love. I even saw how it integrates with Litmus if we want to start extending it. But as a practitioner, what am I actually doing in there? Does it work with Chaos Monkey? Do I even need other chaos tools, or can I do everything within Harness now with that capability?
You can do everything within Harness. So because it's based on Litmus, right? Everything you can do inside of Harness. And this is where, again, we want to use the signals that you're used to getting. We want to look at your APM tools. We want to look at your metrics. We want to look at your logs with that same understanding. So great, I took it out. Yeah, it's working, but how well is it working? Right? Am I still at the latency requirements that I have? Do I still have the throughput requirements that I have? Like all of those different pieces, it actually gets back down to the same thing that my third and fourth graders are learning, right? Scientific method. We've got a hypothesis. Let's go test it. But now you get it to be more intricate, and now it's automated. And it also is looking at it like your best engineers so they don't have to.
And like you said, this will tie into SLIs, SLOs. This is all part of that package. Do I need any external capability, or is this 100% run within your controlled walls?
100% run within the walls. If you want, a lot of folks want to run this on premise because of how overreaching it can be. And so, of course, it's offered as an on-premise offering where you can keep it all inside of your internal walls. You can, of course, have no access to it. So it's designed that way by default. If you think about it, if I've got a system that's designed to create chaos, I don't want somebody accidentally creating chaos. And so a lot of folks want that on-premise, and we offer it. Just like all of our offerings, by the way. I know we talk about SaaS. It's our primary way to do it. But, if you look at folks like, ZKB, Zurich Bank, if you look at some of the others that are highly regulated in crazy environments, the Russian Sberbank, before this whole happened, they were an on-premise customer. No longer. That renewal is not one that we were going to take. But we offered everything on-premise as well. And I think, when it comes to chaos, this is, again, making it something that's consumable, and it's making it something that's now easy to start with. And that crawl, walk, run, like, let's make those ones easy, right? To your point, comes with all the playbooks so we can test what we want. As we get more complex, we've got a customer who really has, built a practice around it. It's enabled to leverage that as well.
Well, security minded, I imagine, like you said, you got to protect from folks just injecting chaos without the proper controls. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about STO. STO, if you can, give us a primer on STO. How does it work? What can it really offer back to an organization? Because I think all of our customers are almost focusing here first before some of these higher order capabilities.
Sure. I think security test orchestration is just that. The intention is every customer we talk to, they've got 4, 5, 7 different security scanning tools. SAS, DAS, container scanning, code scanners. And then we've got an entire team that's trying to figure out what that all means, deduplicating it, trying to normalize it, and usually it comes out as an Excel spreadsheet that somebody's got to go fix. And to us, it screamed inefficiency. And we've got some of the smartest security engineers on the planet doing very menial tasks. And so again, let's go and understand, all right, what CVEs do we know about that are inside the system that security is already working on and we have tickets for? So let's have those there. And then let's aggregate, normalize, and deduplicate all of the inputs from every single tool we have. Like, yes, they all speak 7 different languages, but why not have something bring it down and facilitate it in a way that's meaningful? So get you, instead of having 7 versions of the same CVE from 7 different tools, I'll show you one with a higher potency for it. But again, you don't need to see 7 different versions of these. And also, if it's something that security is already taken care of or they have a plan for, remove it from your list. So what do you want to know as an engineer? I want to know about the CVEs that I introduced in my code commit. I want to know what packages I added that broke it. Not the ones we've known about forever. Not the ones we're working on. I want to know about the brand new ones. And that's what we should start focusing on. And that's really what it's about. So it's about bringing that information to the forefront. And when we talked about shift left, bringing that information left, that should happen now. Great. It's happening at code commit. It's happening once it becomes a container. It's happening as it's pushing to the different systems. And we're running those tests. And you know now, not 2 weeks later, when you've changed your context. And again, those are things that, again, we can work on together. So now we're empowering both teams. I'm not the bad guy coming back and say that thing we have to pull out of production. I'm giving you the information. We're creating a plan. Once we've created the plan, now we can move forward. But it's getting that information in the hands right now.
Yeah. Maybe one final question, Nick, on just building on this STO side of things here. When we talked about the carrot and the stick, or even the tail wagging the dog type of things in organizations and how things are manifest themselves. Given where DevSecOps is going, and if an organization is struggling with their traditional rationalization of CI/CD pipelines and processes and things of that nature, we know security is an imperative. Organizations cannot function and release code that is vulnerable, yet there's continued workarounds or bypasses, things of that nature. So STO introduces that functionality to enforce those guardrails, add context to the developer of what code he's potentially introducing and things of that nature. Would it be too far-fetched to say, well, security, could be that stick in the shape of a carrot that, hey, the developers are really facing a pain, we're going to reduce it, and at the same time, security is so important, it does need to have the weight of the stick, but the carrot is really making everybody's life easier with that context. Is that a good way to look at things?
Yeah, I think, right, if we look at operations and we look at dev, on the dev side of the world and the ops side of the world, security is in different locations on their priority list, right? In most organizations, not all, but in most. And I think that's been one of the biggest problems. It causes some of that friction. And if you remove that friction by providing the people the information, it solves itself, right? If you give a system where people can operate in the context that they're used to and not have to get out and go from a security person and go and learn a dev context, or vice versa, go from a dev experience and try to learn a whole new security context. If you can provide it in a context that's meaningful, then we work together. And I think that's genuinely been what's missing. And so to your point, STO is something everybody wants. Developers want it because they're not having to go back 2 weeks later and figure this stuff out. Because now you literally just sidetracked them, right? I got to go back and shift entire context and figure this out. Security wants to be able to implement this. Like you made a good point. We had customers. I was like, hey, wait, why is that in your current pipeline, non-harness pipeline? Why is there this, blank, for some code scanner that's entirely blank? They're like, well, our security requires us to have a code scanner, so we run a step, but we don't actually do the code scan because it takes too long. Mm-hmm. Those types of things you shouldn't be able to skip those. And so by adding policy on top of it, I know we talked about it already, that's what now gives you context. Like, great, okay, you have that step, but how many CVEs came out of it? You have no output from it? Sorry, right? So it gives you that good ability to make it so it's not a bad guy situation. We're not fighting. We're actually working together.
One more question for me on this one, and then last question.
So he says.
Yeah, so he said. The STO space is fascinating. It's a fairly new launch. You have a team of data scientists. You guys are doing some incredible things from, like I said, from a patent perspective and just innovation perspective. What do we see next on STO? Are you going to be going broader to make more integrations? Or do you go deeper to make tighter correlations and go down that space? If maybe you're doing both, but where does STO go? Because this is one that we're watching, we're excited about. All your products we are, but this is one that our customers are just begging for. What's next that you can share, Nick?
Yeah, I think so. We cover about 95% of the tools, both open source and closed source today. So as far as wider, Probably not. We also allow you to do custom integrations as well. So if there is that random one we don't support, or in some of our customers' cases, the one they wrote themselves, you can integrate with that. Depth is where if you take and you apply what we've done with continuous delivery, and we've really applied a massive amount of machine learning, tiny bit of AI, to think about deployments like your best engineers, we want to do the same things with your security testing. In fact, this ties into the same thing that we do for chaos. As you actually start looking at teams and how they operate, if you start looking at the way their code bases are, you can actually have a percentage understanding of if they have a failure, will it be a big failure? If we're implementing things during code bases, like what's the percentage of CVs that traditionally come up? And so we can actually start doing predictive understanding of different teams. And so, again, we've done this type of modeling throughout the whole, as Harness as a whole, but really now it's fine-tuning it for each one of the different kind of modules or applications that we support. I will state this, and I said it earlier, like we're not an if you build it, they will come company. So what we do is we release a full feature product, and we see how the industry is using it, and we see where those benefits can come. And anytime we find ways to make it more efficient for the team, to give back that time to those security engineers, to the developers, to the operations teams, that's where we spend the time. And so if we can go ahead and remove the time frames, we already did the normalization, right? Deduplicating, that's a huge amount of effort that people spend in time. But now if I can even start doing predictive modeling on it, now it gets more interesting.
All right, Nick. This has been an awesome discussion. I think Darren can go on forever, but we know we have used up your valuable time. Thank you so much for going through the value proposition that Harness has for our listeners, and hope to be in touch soon.
Absolutely. Well, and honestly, thank you, gentlemen, for having me on the program. Absolutely loved it. If you ever need me back, we're more than welcome to come on.
All right.
And if you do want to try Harness, please go ahead. You can go to harness.io and you can try it literally today.
Love it. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. We'll have you back.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.